UFC Macau wrapped up this past weekend, this last Saturday, and we are going to recap my predictions, reactions, all of that now in this video. Now, I'm a bit late to it, but we're here now, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe. This is Masked MMA. Let's begin. Now, Nicholas Mota and Mahesate Heiser. I always butchered some of these names. Um, yeah, I mean, Nicholas Mota was just not only the more efficient boxer, but he was also the more powerful one in certain occasions, I noticed. So, I mean, I had to rewatch some of these. Most of the ones early on, I couldn't watch live because in my time zone, it was still the morning, and I woke up a bit late to these. So, rewatching it, I was surprised. Well, even when I woke up, I was quite frankly surprised to see that Mota was more efficient because even though, or even that he won, because even though Hasier isn't the greatest, especially now knowing that he loses to Mota, he did have the power, I believe, to put out Nicholas Mota, and Nicholas Mota has been KO'd before. It's just that he wasn't as efficient, and he just wasn't as technical. That's just what it came down to. So, I mean, yeah, I was quite surprised by this result, but I knew that it would be, at the very least, an interesting stylistic matchup. And moving on, we have Long Jiao versus Quang Li. Now, this was quite competitive up until the KO, and you could see the change in the dynamics of the fight, where Long Jiao was getting better as the fight went on. Quang Li was doing his best work early on. And yeah, I mean, Quang Li kind of, maybe he just has a good style for Chris Gutierrez, or because he fought him on short notice. Either way, that was a one-off with Chris Gutierrez, but now we see that Long Jiao is pretty decent, and he's only 26, going to be 27 likely when he fights next. So I look forward to seeing him, and he could be a prospect. Who knows? I mean, he already has a ton of fights, so the experience is there. Let's just see if he can capitalize. Not great early on the card, but we pick things up with Lunar Kavanaugh and Jose Ocha. Now this one, Loner Kavanaugh was a little bit more technical all around. That's just what it came down to. And I did expect a little bit more from him, if I'm being completely honest. I did expect him to look a little better. Maybe that's just because Jose Ocha is also really good. However, I just thought that maybe he would. I thought it would make it a little more convincing. Either way, he did look really technical, really good, but hopefully he'll improve, right? He is only 25, and yeah, I was surprised that a lot of people picked a KO because, yeah, I mean, a KO to me, it's just, I feel like he's had quite a few decisions, and the guys that he's finishing, Loner Kavanagh is fighting those like lower level people who don't have like a 7-0 ranking to their name, so that is mainly why I didn't pick a KO. And yeah, pretty good one right there. Two decisions back to back that I got. Pretty good. I got a lot of these picks perfect, especially early on. The first four fights I got right were perfect. Two first round KOs and two decisions. So pretty good there. But this one, I was surprised to see that the Weasel favored Niam Goral Tumadambaral so heavily. I was surprised to see that. And Carlos Hernandez, yeah, he was just way more technical on the feet. Even in the Weasel's video, he was saying how um, Hernandez wasn't quite as technical in certain areas, and that he didn't have as good. Maybe I'm paraphrasing wrong here, but I think he said that he didn't have as good of a right hand or many techniques he was just giving to he wasn't giving to Carlos Hernandez. So I was surprised, and yeah, I thought that the if you look at the obviously the styles and the opponents of Tumun Demborel it was just even the records. It was just subpar compared to what Carlos Hernandez was dealing with in the octagon beforehand. I mean, you see him fight um, his last opponent. I can't believe I'm forgetting, but his last opponent had crazy scrambles. He was just barely losing those exchanges. So I without a doubt in my mind see saw like a lot of paths to victory. Mainly the fact that he could succeed in the scrambles and make his way back to the feet and just be more technical there. Um, Obviously, the reach was not there for him, but he managed to make up for it. Aside from the fact that he got knocked down that one time, it was pretty clear to me. So yeah. Um, and then Ming Shi versus Jiang Feng. Um, Now the story coming out of this one is it's crazy that she's a doctor and she's also a flyweight, and she managed to have the most devastating KO of the card. It's pretty crazy. Um, yeah, I mean it's a really cool story where she's a doctor and a UFC fighter. Um, and she's 30. Like you can still make some improvements at 30 in women's MMA, especially at the lower weight classes. The lower weight classes are quite competitive for women's MMA, but it's still like, yeah, I mean, crazy upset. Not much else to say. The head kick was there in the latter half of the fight. The first two rounds, I would say that Mingxi was losing, but it wasn't like a complete shutout, and she proved that she could make her comeback, right? Because she did. That's what happened. So big win for her. We'll see what she does in the UFC. And we have Dong Hun Choi, got that mixed up there, and Kyuhuru Sota. Now this one was honestly, um, yeah, this one honestly like to me it was just I didn't look into these two fighters all too much. This one was one of the ones where I didn't do a whole lot of analysis. Yeah, analysis is the right word. Not a whole lot of analysis here. It was just mostly like more powerful, more technical overall. I know I've been saying technical for a lot of these fighters, but it's the truth. Kihiro Sota, he also just kind of looked skinnier. He just looked like he wasn't as built for the weight class. And Dunhun Choi was pretty much better in every department. And I mean, it's crazy that, you know, 5'5". I mean, he didn't look 5'5" to 5'10", but it's crazy that a 5'5" with 66.5-inch reach disadvantage managed to win so convincingly, right? Pretty crazy stuff. And Minying Zhang, oh nope, Su Young Yu and Bergang Jelilsi. Okay, I sometimes these names I just shouldn't even attempt because it's just butchered all around. Um, Slight favorite, yeah. I mean, I was basically just going off of, I don't know, he was an underdog. He seemed like he had a slightly like, it was the opposition was quite comparable, and he had slightly advantage in the height and the reach, and I thought that that was going to be enough because yes, even though the last guy I picked, he also had a reach disadvantage, and so you may be asking, oh well, if you're going off of reach and all that, then why didn't you pick against the last guy, Jun Hu Sung? What was it? Dong Hun Choi. Yeah, I mean, basically, my reasoning was a little different here because the competition to me looked pretty comparable amongst these two fighters. At least record wise, I didn't do a whole lot of research on this fight and the last one, to be honest. But the records looked comparable to whom they were beating. And I saw that there was a bit of an experience advantage and a height and a reach advantage for this guy here, Better Gang, compared to Su Young Yu. I thought that it was a little more comparable than the last two guys, whereas I thought that it was pretty obvious that Sahota, compared to Choi, was just all around like didn't seem like he was as prepared as far as opposition goes, as far as um, what he had to deal with, what adversities he had to deal with before the UFC, what kind of opposition, all that. It just he didn't seem as impressive as like Bear Gang. Um, and so I thought that he was a pretty good underdog, but I mean, he made the decision, but he didn't win the decision. So tough luck to him, and yeah, good win for Young Yu. And now we get into the ones that I'm actually much more interested in. We have Minyang Zhang versus Ozzy Diaz. I think that this was pretty obvious. Ozzy Diaz lost to Joe Pyfer, and I'm pretty sure it was a knockout as well. Minyoung Zhang, he's a really good prospect for the division. He's got I mean, sure, his reach and height isn't that impressive for light heavyweight, but he's got the power, and he's on an 18 fight KO streak. Like, that is insane. Definitely a guy to look out for. And I also looked at the age, and I was like, yeah, this guy, even if he loses his next few fights or one of his next few fights, it's definitely a guy to look out for because he is so young still. It's like Armin Tsarukyan, where he if he loses to Islam Makhachev early in his career, it doesn't really matter that much because of how young Min Ying Zhang is. So he's definitely a guy that's going to be at least top 15, definitely. Um, and yeah, good elbow, good short elbow in the clinch. Um, Ozzy Diaz just looked slower. People comparing him to Martin Buday, I think, but I see him more as just like Ozzy Diaz was his own fighter. Yeah, he looked slow, he looked kind of blobby, but I actually think Martin Buday kind of has a little bit of a better chin. Yeah, he was kind of just not really responding well to Shamil Ghaziev's pressure, but he wasn't getting dropped or anything. Minyon Jang does have more power than Shamil for sure, definitely, but my point still stands. I think Ozzy Diaz is just yes, he is kind of like bloated and slow, but I'm pretty sure he was fighting at middleweight for most of his career anyway, so that's probably why they just probably gave him an opportunity on this card and he took it because he might not have gotten the chance in the UFC otherwise. So yeah. And then we have Carlos Solberg versus Volkan Ozdemir. I thought Volkan Ozdemir won this. I actually thought he won the first and the third. I know most people would disagree on that, but listen, I thought that Volkan didn't get rocked in the first round was clear to Volkan. The second and the third are the ones that are debatable. The third one, in my opinion, is how Volkan actually won the fight because the second one I thought that Carlos Solberg was keeping his distance and he was landing more overall in that round, in my opinion. And then in the third round, honestly, Volkan he didn't really look like he was getting backed up or getting rocked or wobbled, you guys. Weasel reference didn't look like he was getting rocked or wobbled at all. And meanwhile, Carlos Solberg was constantly backing up from the punches. And now I'm not going to be like one of these boxing ring generalship guys who's like, oh, he was backing up, that's why. No, I'm saying that the punches backed him up. And you could clearly see there was a difference in the power. Like, yes, Volkan Ozdemir would be halted by some jabs or some leg kicks, but it was not nearly enough. And he wasn't landing like what Lucas Tracy said, three, four, or five more for every one or two punches that Volkan was landing. I don't agree. I thought it was very close. I definitely think Color Solberg could have won it, but I give it to Volkan, and I still do. Going back, I thought that going into this as well, I thought like Carlos Solberg definitely would be able to keep the distance better, but because he looked really good against Alonzo Menifield, just countering very well. But Volkan, I guess, was just much more educated in closing the distance. But really, was he? Because there were few moments early, like even in the first round, where he was kind of lunging in a little bit. And I was like, what? How come he's not being capitalized on by Carlos Solberg with his beautiful counters? I don't get it. Either way, I mean, Carlos Solberg, he'll probably get a title shot if Pereira beats Ankalaev, or I don't know, maybe if Ankalaev eventually beats Jamal Hill or Yuri Prohaska, and then a Pereira rematch if he beats Pereira twice. I'm basically saying I think Carlos Solberg will challenge for the title, but I don't see him ever touching the belt because this was a kind of mediocre performance. And Kong Wang versus Gabriel Fernandez. Yeah, I mean, basically this was a kickboxing fight for the first round. for the most part, and she was Kong Wang, the Joker, was winning, and then she gets timed beautifully with the head kick, and then she gets dropped with a left hand, I think, if I remember correctly, and then Gabriela Fernandez, being the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu expert, she managed to get the submission, rear naked choke, I believe. Let me just double check here. Yep. And yeah, I mean, Kong Wang, she looked to be the superior kickboxer, obviously. I mean, she fought Valentina Shevchenko in her kickboxing days, but I mean, she's new to the sport. She doesn't know the jiu-jitsu that well, and it's one of those situations where it's like, oh man, like Bo Nickel, it's like, come on, you are a huge favorite. You could have just kept the distance, used it to your advantage, made it a decision point fight. You could have done that. And instead, you were hungry for the finish because you wanted a finish in your home crowd. And I understand this was a layup and you were a huge favorite. But it's like, I mean, if you just got a convincing decision, it would have been quite pleasing to see. I mean, this was quite kind of exposing of her game, and you know, it's better than Bo. It would have been better than Bo Nickel if she just gotten a clear 30-27. Because unlike Bo Nickel and the stupid judges, I don't know how they all gave a 30-27 unanimous. I actually didn't think that was a convincing 30-27. I thought it was more like a close, razor close 29-28, if I'm being completely honest. So if Kong Wang just kept her distance well and didn't allow any of the jujitsu or the, you know, well-timed counters from Gabriel Fernandez to land, if she didn't let any of her, if she just kept the distance and used her experience in kickboxing, she could have gotten a clear 30-27 and we would have been fine with that. But, that's just unfortunate that Kong Wang, the Joker, another prospect, is out of the game. And it's not going to look like she's going to make a run for the title. It's not looking very good, if I'm being honest. So, Muslim Salikov, though, gets a huge wheel kick KO on Kenon Song. Now, I thought that this would be a pitter-pat decision because, yes, Kenon Song looked pretty bad against Ricky Glenn, I think it was, but he still like looked decent in the boxing department. He did get taken down by Ricky Glenn, which is kind of pathetic if I'm being honest. He got taken down multiple times as far as my memory. If my memory is right there, I believe he got taken down a few times, and he actually made it competitive. But that wasn't what I was basing this on. I just didn't think Muslim Salikov had the stamina and the endurance and the all that he didn't have at 40. I didn't think he would have that timing and all that speed and to land that KO, that spinning wheel kick KO. It's just like for sure bonus worthy performance for sure. This and the head kick KO from the doctor, I think it was Xing Mi. Let me just double check that. Ming Shi, I got the first letters mixed up there. Ming Shi, them two definitely deserve the performance bonus. Yeah, I think she got it. Yeah. Them two definitely had the most impressive knockouts. And they were both head kicks. Crazy. Yeah, I mean, I was surprised at how 50-50 this was because the only real thing that you could say to pick Kenan Song here was the age of Muslim Salikov if he didn't really have it in him anymore. Because Santiago, can I speak? Santiago Ponzinibbio. Yes, he's certainly not how he was in the prime, but this is Santiago Ponzinibbio that he beat last time, and he's definitely better than Kenan Song. So, I mean, it was pretty clear to me. I just didn't think that he'd get the KO, which was crazy. Shocker. Very cool. Yao Xiaoyan, Tabitha Ricci. Clear as day. Pretty obvious pick. Most people were picking her. I'm surprised that even 18% of Ricci picked, or 18% of people picked Ricci. And yeah, I mean, Tabitha Ricci was basically just a punching bag. Yao Zhangyan was clear as day, ahead on every department of the game, especially the kickboxing. I mean, it didn't really touch the mat, but my point stands. It's it was just a shutout, and yeah, Tabitha Ricci rightfully should be critiqued for landing like nothing almost. I mean, in the first round she landed 0 strikes, I'm pretty sure. That's crazy. I mean, definitely should be ashamed of that one. And last but not least, Piotr Jan Davison Figueiredo. I made a dedicated video to this one. Basically, Piotr Jan, I honestly don't think he deserves the title shot over Umar just because he got 50-45 to Merab Dvalishvili, but he looked incredible, and I would love to see him versus Sean O'Malley for the #1 contender spot. Great fight. This was definitely fight of the night. And yeah, I mean, Piotr Jan, I love to see him win, get back to winning ways, and stay tuned for the full UFC 310 predictions. And like, comment, subscribe, like I said before. Masked MMA signing out.